Good afternoon, Garden State. I'm Brent Johnson of NJ Advanced Media, and we're here to talk about schools reopening in New Jersey in a few weeks as the coronavirus continues to linger. Yesterday, Governor Phil Murphy said he's signing an executive order and has signed an executive order that is clearing the way for schools in New Jersey, both colleges and K through 12, to reopen for in-person instruction. But he also said schools that can't meet the state's reopening standards will be allowed to begin the year with all students learning remotely, which is a change from previous weeks. He stressed the goal is to still have schools reopen as much as possible for in-person classes. And this comes a day after 3 of the state's education leaders pressed him to have all schools remain closed and for learning to be all remote out of fear of the virus. We're joined by all 3 today. Marie Blistan, president of the New Jersey Education Association, the state's largest teachers union. Richard Bozza, executive director of the New Jersey Association of School Administrators, and Patricia Wright, executive director of the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association. Thank you all 3 for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you.
So going back to the governor's announcement yesterday, what are you hearing from members about that? And is this a good compromise? What are you telling your members? What's your reaction?
Well, I can jump in here. I'm hearing a lot of frustration, frankly. Our superintendents in leading this, along with their staff members, have had to pivot several times, and would have been much happier had all of the options been laid out months in advance rather than just a few weeks before school opens. But it does give them an opportunity now to take a look at the plans that they've developed. Nearly 500 had already been submitted to the Department of Education, and to see if they are actually doable plans or if they need to rethink whether or not they can open with health and safety fully in mind and able to complete it. And so we have that opportunity to do that now. And especially in the past weeks, as we've heard about more and more staff members who will not be returning, the question of safety really is looming as we go toward the beginning of the school year.
Brent, I'll add that on behalf of our members, proud classroom teacher myself, well over 35 years in the classroom, that the feeling from our members has been of anxiety. This is not a natural state for us not to be in classrooms and in our buildings and on school buses with our students. But at the same time, knowing that we're getting more and more information about the virus, the transmission rate on inside of buildings, when the plan started to come together, our members were working closely with the superintendents, with the principals to see what we could do. It became more and more evident that we could not ensure that health and safety for the students nor for our members. And so the governor's announcement yesterday, although we were disappointed that he did not take a recommendation to make this statewide, it was still a step in the right direction. But we feel very strongly that this is a situation that affects not just the school building, it affects the entire community. It is really health related, and to leave those decisions still in the hands of schools, I'm not even a nurse, I'm a classroom teacher, we believe is very problematic.
Yeah, I have to agree with Marie on that. I think some of the frustration that Rich's members are feeling as superintendents is that they are now charged with the onus of that decision, and knowing that they have worked really hard to put these plans in place, but still not having appropriate funding, staffing, equipment, ventilation, those kinds of issues, knowing that's looming. Having that option to go virtual is very important for them, because their number one goal and our members' number one goal, Marie's members' number one goal, is to ensure the safety of all students and the community. We know students can spread this virus, and so we don't want to see community spread moving again throughout New Jersey.
Polls show that people are split pretty much in half in the state. You have parents who also believe that remote learning isn't that great for their kids or isn't as good as in-person learning. What do you say to critics who say the outbreak is decreasing? Why not bring kids back into school? What is the danger still with the virus, the rate of transmission being below 1?
Well, Brent, I'll I'll jump in right away on that because it's been, we have members that are also parents as well. And we understand that when polls were first taken, it depends on the question that you asked. And everyone wants to get back to in-person. Virtual is not the best, but it is the best option, the only option when you cannot ensure the safety and the health of the people and the children who are coming into those buildings. Nationally, I just saw a poll that once the information has been out regarding the transmission rate again and the ability of children to transmit this horrible disease just as quickly and effectively as an adult, and what that outcome has been, the polling is showing that over 60% of the parents of children in schools are stating that they want the schools to open in person later so that there's an ability to get the resources in place. 70% of the public generally believe that a delayed in the start of in-person instruction, because let's remember, schools can and will open in September for instruction. Our recommendation is that they're not open for in-person because, as Pat and Rich have noted, we have not been able to get all the safety protocols in place.
I also think it's problematic that we had districts had to plan for several plans. And it is unfortunate that we did not come to this decision earlier so that we could have spent more significant time this summer within our schools building up the capacity for high quality virtual learning. Because no matter what happens moving forward, virtual learning is going to be part of this school year, whether it's because it's all virtual, part of a hybrid model, which would be the next step, or if schools have to close because of illness, even if they open, we're back to virtual again. So we really need to spend some time closing the digital divide, making sure that that teachers, educators have the appropriate professional learning. Let us have time to look at what happened in the spring and learn from those mistakes and learn from that experience and strengthen our virtual learning.
Brent, we've been meeting, when I say we, all of the leaders of the major educational organizations weekly since mid-March, talking about these issues, talking about primarily health issues. Clearly there is no substitute for in-person learning and having all the support that our students and families need. But we have said consistently that we need health standards that are clear, that are directed. The last thing that I want as an educator is to have an educator making a medical or health decision. And so we've been very strongly in opposition to a district by district decision by the superintendent of schools without having the adequate health information, which we still do not have as of today. So all of the issues of delaying to have preparation, to be able to prepare staff for this, we want to be in a place where we know that it is as safe as it possibly can be and our staff are as prepared as they can possibly be.
Do you think we need to have a vaccine before it's safe to go to school? Is it that far along? I mean, is that far we have to wait for?
So this is exactly the trap I wouldn't fall into because I'm not a medical doctor, right? So would I feel more comfortable if that were the case? How could I say I wouldn't? But there are some people that don't believe in vaccinations, et cetera. So we have to rely on the health officials to tell us precisely the answers to these questions.
And I'll just add that to your previous question, Brent, that we have gotten lower numbers, thankfully, in the state. The governor has done a great job in keeping restrictions into place, but he's also then added more restrictions. We're still in stage 2 of even the governor's plan. We still do not have indoor restaurants. Our gyms are not open, movie theaters are not open, and we are restricted even when we go into a grocery store or a drugstore. And so those types of conditions have kept this state free, or at least lesser amounts of the virus spreading. But we have looked very closely at our counterparts in other states that moved way too hastily to open up school buildings where the outbreaks have been enormous. I only have to mention Texas, Indiana, Florida, Georgia. I don't think I have to say anything more. We in New Jersey, we have the best public schools in the United States. It's because we have we have personnel that are dedicated to that. And so we're not shy about speaking up when we're saying that we need more time and resources so that in fact, we will keep that quality public education, but we're also telling you we will work to keep the students, their families, our staff, and their families.
Are you seeing a lot of teachers who are already asking that they be the ones to teach remotely? How many retirements are you expecting from this? Meaning people are saying, I'm going to retire instead of go back. And is this something we can, the shortage of teachers, we can fix in time for the governor's plan to go forward?
Well, we are, as the weeks go by, we're seeing more requests because of either personal health conditions or family or even childcare issues that we're getting more and more requests, which are making, quite frankly, the operation in a safe manner of schools becoming difficult, not in every place, but in many places. And so having said that, that is an opportunity now for school districts to take a look at current data as they survey staff and survey families to see where they are and what they might be able to do.
And as far as actually fixing that problem and having more staff quickly, that's literally almost impossible due to the fact that substitutes were difficult to find in schools before the pandemic. Now you're asking to find substitutes in a pandemic when many of them are, again, facing those fears of, are they safe going into schools?
I just want to put a plug in here for our teacher preparation programs. I've heard from people like Suzanne McCarter at what used to be Trenton State, the College of New Jersey, saying, we have well-qualified people for student teachers that are willing to step up. And so we're getting support from many areas, and I'm just happy to say that our universities are stepping up as well.
Is there a number of teachers we have that we know have retired or have sought retirement?
We keep track of that, Brent, and up to about a week ago, our numbers were about the same as what they had been or what we would expect. Since that time, when the plans became more evident, more public, and I'm talking about in this last week, there's an anxiety level out there. I'm going to use the word confidence. We are in the midst of a pandemic, but there are certain things that are still happening, such as grocery stores are opening, are open, our drugstores are open, but there are restrictions and there are things in place that people are confident about going in and out. Well, it's going to have to be the same with our school buildings. Again, when we have indoor restaurant opening, and dining is still not allowed because of the indoor quality that the governor himself has said is actually deadly. We know that when we're asking large groups of people to come into buildings, some of which 2,500 buildings, in fact, in this state are 50 years or older, we know that the ventilation system is going to need types of upgrades and certainly have to be kept up probably on a weekly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly basis. Those things before people have confidence about going into those buildings. One of the things that we know, the governor had mandated everyone had to wear masks on the outside, which had only been on the inside of buildings, right, for most of the spring and most of the summer. But a few weeks ago, he saw an uptick in the numbers and he immediately issued an EO stating, even on the outside, if you were within 6 feet of another human being, it was mandatory to wear masks. Well, originally in the Department of Ed document, it was not mandated that everyone in the building would wear a cloth mask. A couple weeks ago, about a week ago, I guess, Governor Murphy came out and said, no, everyone in the building will now need to be wearing a mask unless you hit, one of the exceptions. Well, when the school districts tried to procure those masks, they found out that the medical supply houses do not see school districts at the top of the chain for needing those types of equipment. Obviously, hospitals, people who are in nursing homes, they would take the priority. And there has been a distinct hardship in trying to even get those things in place, which is just one part of that word confidence when we're asking people to come back in mass into school buildings.
I think the other thing, I'm sorry, I think the other thing I think the other thing that has damaged the confidence is some of the guidance has been ambiguous in terms of the health standards. And that's why we collectively, we have asked for universal standards that are clear. Because, for example, in some schools, you must have 6 feet of distance, and that's the priority, getting 6 feet of distance in the classroom. But it also says if you can't do that, then you can put up plexiglass barriers. And if you can't do that, you can wear masks within the classroom. Well, those are 3 different levels to me of protection. And I think as we see different districts implementing these health guidelines, given sentences like if practical or practicable, and if not this, do this, I think that shakes people's confidence in whether or not they're sending their child to a district that has everything in place, or and are protecting their children to the best that can be. So I think we have to have some equity, because what we're fearing is causing an inequity in health safety in different districts around the state.
Speaking of masks, what happens if a student doesn't wear a mask in school? Will teachers have to become the mask police? And how will social distancing be enforced in general in schools?
Well, that's a very good question, one that we've all discussed. The governor has mandated it, so that's number one. Number two, even with the guidelines were clear that each district was going to have to come up with board policy, and we know that any rules or procedures that are in our schools are done through board policy. And again, going back to the timing, trying to get all that in place, including, as Pat noted, professional development. By the way, also having conversations with parents in the community about what those rules, such as mask wearing, would be. It's too short a time period to put that all into place. Let alone, there were some districts that just can't afford to get those masks. So even if they could find them, they weren't able to afford them. Some of our districts were desperate, and they said, well, the only thing we can do is to ask parents to bring them in, and some of whom were also strapped. And so, as to Pat's point about inequities, we were seeing that more and more, especially over this last week, once the plans started to become public.
There are still people in the state who don't like remote learning at all, parents who think it's not good. What assurances can you give to parents that it's going to be better this time, and that their kids learning remotely won't be a problem? And also for daycare, for parents who literally have 2 jobs, houses that have parents with each have a job, they can't be home with their kids. Is there something districts are going to do to help with that?
You know, we've talked about the importance of the collaboration of parents in normal times and how critical that is. And obviously it's difficult for them. And in talking with parents, even at the end of the school year last year, you know, they were frustrated because, as we've indicated, it got better from the period of March through June. And I think wherever it is occurring this year will be even more, having had more time to prepare. But clearly it's not perfect. And so we want to do the best that we can. We want to work with parents, and we know that they had to step up significantly to work with their children. And as we talked about inequities, there's obviously inequities there. The governor has come in to try to provide additional money for the purchase of equipment and to make sure that there's connectivity. But the difficulty with that is even Chromebooks and other kinds of devices are backed up where you can't get them right away. So we're going to experience some of that as we move forward. And as with, you know, learning after things happen, we wish that the state had moved much earlier to do something in this fashion to be better prepared.
It's the same thing with childcare. We have used this time to really work as communities to figure out childcare. Childcare is not the responsibility completely of the school system. It's a community responsibility. And I think that's what districts have been doing, is try to bring in childcare providers to figure out, because even in the virtual plans, the hybrid plans, that was not solving the issue of childcare when your child is going only a couple of days a week. So that issue is still there and really has to be looked at as a community.
And I will add also total agreement. Many of our members are also parents. We are very well aware of the child care challenges that our homes have had. We've been very grateful for the support that parents and guardians gave to the students in home who were still learning remotely in the spring. I was not present during the hurricane that hit our state, that devastated our state, but I was a state officer. And as soon as the roads cleared, I literally went to each of the areas of the state that had been basically knocked out for weeks, by the way, from that storm. And what I found was that whole communities came together. Schools absolutely had been wiped out, but it wasn't viewed at that time as a school problem. The communities came together, the mayors, the town councils, the elected legislators, the churches, the groups like Boys and Girls Club, YMCAs, YMCAs came together, and they opened up community centers so that instruction could absolutely go on. It wasn't the same, but there was some instruction, but there also the child care was also addressed. It's a worldwide pandemic. It's a medical crisis. There's no playbook in our lifetime of how to get through this. I do believe that people have the best interest in mind. Everyone wants to get to the finish line. It's going to take a while longer. I believe that. But I also believe that the only way that we are going to get through this is if we come together, community by community.
Other statewide teachers unions have sued their states to stop in-person classes. Some NJAA members have criticized the union for not taking a stronger stance by calling for all remote classes earlier. Why did you delay until the other day?
For us, well, we had always said health and safety was number one. The governor has always said that he will make his decision, his final decision on reopening buildings and reopening schools based on the science and the data. And we were waiting to see what the science and the data was. Once we did, and once we started working on those teams, which really just started to occur for most districts inside of the last 3 to 4 weeks, it became more and more apparent, again, with more and more information that we were getting about this virus, that trying to open on a certain date in September was just not feasible. I have been saying that for about 5 weeks at this point. And I think, look, I know my house inside out and backwards. I'm not a building principal, but I know this much, that when my building principal says to me, I can't get things in place inside of this building in time for a certain date, that's a red flag. I'm going to pay attention. And I applauded Pat and her organization for coming out. I immediately backed her up. And when we spoke to Rich and we all got together talking about what the status was, it was clear across the board that we want to open, we want to get back to in-person, but to attest to a family member, to a parent, that when you drop your child off into our care and our responsibility, to attest that that building is as safe as what it can be and what it should be, we don't take that lightly. We decided that we were going to have to come out and make that recommendation to Governor Murphy.
So I'm going to end on a few rapid fire questions from readers. So from Elise on Instagram, will teachers have to use sick days in quarantine?
We have a whole legal division that is looking at that both in our state and nationally.
From Lauren on Facebook, what happens when someone in school tests positive?
Those are the guidelines that the Department of Health is supposed to come out with, I believe, today. That's a question we have been asking consistently.
From Dawn on Instagram, how can teachers effectively teach in person and remotely at the same time?
It's been a question also that we have been grappling with. Again, our teachers, our staff members come in to do the best job that they can. This is all new, and it poses yet another challenge on equity, on how we're able to do that more at the same time.
From Joe on Facebook, what's the school's liability if a child gets sick?
That liability, I don't think, is clear. There's legislation that has been out there for colleges and universities to protect them. We believe that schools should be included in that. The last thing we want to see is all that hard work to do all of the things that are required to make it safe end up in litigation in the schools.
From Debbie on Facebook, will private schools that were planning on 5 days be allowed to move forward even if the district is remote?
That
Well,
would be
yeah, they
governor.
submit their same plans to the state in terms of what they can maintain in terms of health and safety. So there are school districts that are both public or private that are planning full-time in person, depending on their situation.
And from Angel on Instagram, will sports still take place?
Good
Yeah,
question.
that seems to be changing sands every day as well, from Rutgers down through the from pro down to the high school level and below.
So final two questions from me. Has enough been done to bridge the digital divide, meaning students that don't have devices at home, or does more still need to be done about that, and what can be done?
Well, clearly more still needs to be done. The governor's recognized that. He's put up $54 million towards achieving that goal. What needs to be done now is the opportunity to get the equipment that's needed into those families' homes. And even when we do that, it's still going to be difficult if the mom and dad who are working need the computer, as well as 3 of the children that live in the home. So it's not ideal, but we had, I think the last count, 290,000 students that were left without connectivity.
And I'll add in we represent our community colleges, and I was a little surprised earlier in the spring to find out that they had the same problems with college students who did not have their own devices. They used the college library. When the college library shut down and then businesses shut down, they didn't even have access to internet service. So it's more widespread than just pre-K to 12 for sure.
So lastly, how do you see the beginning of the year playing out based on the plan that's out now? What do you think is going to happen in the first few weeks? Just an overview for parents who are concerned or curious.
Well, for parents, I think they need to be in close contact and communication with their school district, with their principal and superintendent, because it's going to be different in different places, depending on the plan that they submit. So we've seen plans that say students will only begin remotely. In other places, they may be in school 1/2 a day a week. And so it's going to be different for each district. While there may be similarities throughout and different kinds of A/B days, they need to be talking and listening to what's happening in their community.
I'm just going to add that what else is really playing into this is some of the nonsense that's going on down in Washington, D.C., in the Senate, holding up needed money for not only our schools, but for our families who are facing eviction notices, families who are out of work waiting for that extra pay to come through. Look, this government stood up. They bailed out the.
Did we lose Marie?
I think we did.
Here she is. There we go.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's a good place to stop then. Again, thank you all three for joining us. We appreciate you being here, and thank you to our viewers for tuning in. I'm Brent Johnson of NJ Advanced Media, and follow NJ.com throughout the week and throughout the coming months for coverage not just of schools reopening, but what's going on with the coronavirus in the state. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day, New Jersey.